Hi, welcome to another edition of Mosquito Bites and Mystery, the unknown, forgotten, and sometimes kind of kooky history of Florida. I'm Jeff Dixon. I'm your host for this. We're recording in Florida. And Florida, of course, is known for Florida Man, but that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about some events from the past that somehow may not have hit your radar if you're a history buff. And then, of course, we're making a spiritual point about the story. Today, I want to talk to you about a political deal that produced a novel. It sounds like the perfect job, a position without much work and lots of spare time. But where can you find a job like that? See, the story began way back in 1876 when Samuel Tilden and Rutherford Hayes squared off in the presidential election. The Republicans had held the White House for 16 years, beginning with Abraham Lincoln. For some of those years, former Confederates were not eligible to vote, giving an advantage to the Republican Party. By 1876, nearly all of the voting restrictions had been removed, and now the Democrats had a chance to reclaim the White House. So on election night, the Democrat, Tilden, held a wide lead in the popular vote and 184 of the 185 electoral votes he needed to win the presidency. 3 states had not yet reported, including Florida. The Republicans were about to give up, but a Hayes aide saw a chance, and the party would have to do everything to win all 3 of the states and keep the White House. Florida, as it has often been in election season, was the key state, the one the Republicans desperately needed and the toughest one to get. The Republicans dispatched operatives to Florida to do whatever was needed to win the election, whether it was legal or illegal. Their lead representative was Lou Wallace, an Indiana attorney who wanted to be a famous novelist. Wallace arrived in Florida and went to work. He helped bribe local officials, election officials, often with promises for a job in the new administration. And it worked. And the Republicans held the White House. Republicans took the state of Florida. Wallace had done his job. So, after the great work he did in Florida, now was time to reward Wallace for that job. What did he want? His payoff seems small time, considering all that he had done for the party. He was named the territorial governor of New Mexico, a relatively insignificant post at the time. The population was only about 100,000, but he was now the governor of New Mexico. And it was just what Wallace wanted because it gave him plenty of time to write. The result was a novel that would later go on to become an Academy Award-winning movie. Wallace wrote the book Ben-Hur. One of the millions of people who read Ben-Hur was James Garfield, who was elected president in 1880, the same year the book was published. Garfield thought Wallace might like to write a book about Turkey, and so later, when he had the opportunity, he named Wallace the ambassador to Turkey. That appointment inspired him to write The Prince of India, again, another famous novel written by Lou Wallace. A political deal that produced a novel. That story fascinates me because when you look at the news today, when you think about the election cycles of this day, while they are new problems maybe for us as we listen and watch news, they are certainly not new problems. And who would have thought that the author of Ben-Hur was able to write the novel for Ben-Hur because he went and he paid off electors here in the state of Florida that helped win the presidency so he could be named the governor of New Mexico, which gave him time to write a book because there weren't a lot of people in New Mexico and there was nothing to do. Who knew? I bet Charlton Heston didn't know when he was in Ben-Hur. I bet you didn't know it last time you saw the movie. I bet you didn't realize those ties that are there and how that all filters back into the history of this place that we're recording in, the state of Florida. Sometimes when you pull back the history, it's not as clean, and it's not as clear-cut, and it's not as nice as we want it to be. But let's be honest. We all have stuff in our backgrounds, and we all have stuff in our life that if we had the chance to go back and redo it again, we might want to go and clean some things up. Most of us in our life have had moments that were clean up on aisle 6 moments, where really we just trashed something in such a way that if we could relive a certain amount of our life, we would like to eliminate that. The bad news is you can't. But the good news is that in Jesus Christ, he comes in and he does the cleaning. He forgives and he makes us new. Scripture says, behold, I make all things new. And that includes you and me. That's not a political deal. That's a deal that God makes to us. And he offers us that position, forgiven. And it's ours for the taking. The choice, whether to take it or not, is up to you. But don't let your history rob you of the joy of what God might be creating in you today. I look forward to diving into Florida history again with mosquitoes and mysteries, Florida history, next time.